Hi friends, welcome to my channel. My name is Dr. Gwen and I'm a clinical psychologist who's been obsessed with empowering disabled teens and adults to live their absolute best lives. In this video, I interview Dr. Stuart Stofferahn and Jessi Sandberg from the Nebraska Transition College, which we lovingly refer to as NTC. We get into the nuts and bolts of NTC and their mission and vision of the program. We also explore the idea of interdependence and agency, so make sure to stick around to the very end. If you do want to skip around though, timestamps are in the description below. All right, let's go. Stuart and Jessi, thank you so much for spending some time with me today. I thought we could spend some time, or at least start off our interview with telling us about yourself and your experience. And Stuart, maybe you can get us started.
Sure. Yeah. Well, I don't want to take up the entire podcast telling you how I got to where I am, but just a brief background for me is, I'm an educator at heart. So I started teaching in the elementary classroom as a music educator. So it's funny when you start talking about your history. I used to sing opera on stage. I can cite a little Italian, although I try not to because I'm not exactly sure what it means. And, used in the wrong context, I might end up being married and I don't even know it. So, so taught music in elementary school, I was also in the military. I finished up 31 years of military service in the Air Force on December 31st, 2017. I did that at the same time I was a teacher, so I was part-time. And then I went into full-time military service back in 2002. So finished up with about 15 years of full-time service. And while I was doing that, I was, still working in education more along the lines of studies. So I got my master's degree and doctorate in education administration through those years. And along the way, picked up, an interest in what I can do with that degree. And that led us to Nebraska Transition College. And that's why we're sitting right here right now.
Awesome. How about you, Jessi?
Yes, I have been a special education teacher for 18 years. 16 of those years were in the high school setting, and I went into special education because I was passionate about helping students transition from high school to adult living. Mm-hmm. And while I spent those years in education, I realized that there were definitely services that were lacking for our students. And so when I met Stuart about 4 years ago, I believe, I was excited to hear of the concept of Nebraska Transition College because it is what so many of our students are needing. And so for the last 2 years, I've been a part of NTC.
I love it. I love it. And, I was joking about this, but I've been kind of fangirling your program, right? Because I've been watching its development. I've been seeing it before you guys even offered classes. And there's such a felt sense of empowerment and vision that is so awesome. I mean, down to Stuart, you like giving up your car and like feeling that out, and people can see that on your blog, and I'll put the description of that below. But it's awesome. And I think as a psychologist for myself, who's just really laser focused on transition, really figuring out that there's a chasm. It's like an abyss. When students graduate from high school, from most of the times, and hopefully quite a bit of support that wraps right around them with quite a bit of intensity, we go into these really important times of our life that all of us with or without a disability go through, right? Who are we? What choices do we want to make? What are we going to do? But to have a program to be able to do that is really quite a gem. And so this is why I'm like, I've got to talk to NTC in an interview. Anyway, okay, so I'm not going to talk about NTC, but one of you should, and maybe one of you can describe this program fully. Like, what does it look like, and what does it look like in a day in the life of,
Wow, in the day in the life of, So NTC's, and to your point, the chasm, we call it a gap. So when my initial studies for the dissertation wasn't in this field. It was initially about mitigating the effects of poverty on student achievement, and that's where I was starting.
Mm-hmm.
To me, that was my passion, still is, but it was something where it was going to just contribute to data that was already out there, and because we already know the answers to mitigating the effects of poverty on student achievement, but it was just going to contribute to that. And quite honestly, it was kind of an easier path to get the doctorate, if we're just being completely honest.
Sure.
But I knew that the research would contribute. But then I had a conversation with my cousin who lives in Hudson, Wisconsin. And it was just a chance for us to reconnect after many years of just ignoring, the distance and just using the distance as an excuse. And so I took a trip up there. She has a son named Kyle. She has two daughters as well. Kyle was born in Russia. He was adopted from Russia, and he lives with fetal alcohol syndrome. And for Kyle, it presents a lot like autism, especially with regard to social relationships and difficulties initiating those and nurturing those. Kyle has a job. He has a car. He functions highly. So if we want to use that descriptor of high functioning. But Kyle is not in a place where he is, after he graduates high school, that he's going to be able to live on his own if necessary, right? And typically in our society, that's how we look at successful graduation from high school, right? We can go on and do other things, but typically we are ready to live on our own, right? Graduating high school. But for Kyle, there was going to be this gap. It wasn't wide, but it was deep. With regard to, he wasn't really ready to move on to that next step, whether it was, working a full-time job, living independently, or going to a typical 4-year or 3 or 2-year or whatever college, because he just needed some more time to develop social skills, living skills, and work-ready skills. And, in that conversation with my cousin, she, in tears, she said, "I don't know what I'm going to do with Kyle when I die." So it hit me that, I'm a parent of 2 neurotypical children. And so I understand the burden of what it means to be a parent, but I didn't understand that burden that Cindy was faced with in the future. And it hit me that, come on, Cindy, there's got to be something for Kyle. I mean, there's got to be something out there. And so I started looking, and while there are organizations doing great things, they're sort of hit and miss, and there's really not a whole lot of consistency to the programming. And typically the programming that's out there to work on social skills, living skills, and work-ready skills, and we're talking about non-academic programs, because we have academic programs, but we don't have the non-academic programs that focus specifically on those skills. They're typically really, really expensive and sort of and inaccessible to the majority of students, one of those being Kyle. And so I was 2-3 years into my dissertation work, and and that's a lot of work, and I traveled home about 7 or 8 hours in complete silence, thinking about what it is that we could do. I mean, this was maybe an opportunity, as you live life, you have to watch and wait and for those opportunities, and you have the choice to either take them or don't. And this was sort of the universe reaching out to me and saying, "Hey, bonehead, here's an opportunity. You can contribute. You can keep doing what you're doing with your current research, but you can contribute in this way and potentially use the research to build something." And so I threw away all of that research and I started over, and to try and find something for Kyle. But really, Kyle has a verified disability, but this programming is specifically for those folks who are high functioning or have fewer needs to live independently, because in Nebraska anyway, and I think this is more typical throughout the country, that the Kyles of the world might qualify for services, but funding for those services is typically limited. And so the Kyles of the world, while they qualify for services of support, typically don't receive them because the money runs out before Kyle can receive that support, because typically there are students who have higher needs who, need that support first. And, so Kyle gets put on a waiting list. And in Nebraska, the waiting list is years long and in the thousands. So by the time Kyle is eligible, or he's eligible, but by the time he receives that support, he's going to be through that window. And research shows there's a window. There's a window for these students to be engaged and be part of the community. And it's typically a 2-year window. So if we don't find programming for these students to be able to fully engage themselves and immerse themselves in the community in a way that is typical for everyone, and to find that tribe, to initiate friendships, to nurture, to find a place, then we miss that window, and then the opportunities for them to be engaged after that window really taper off. And so that's the beginning of NTC. So what we did is we did some research. We tried to find other programs out there. We found lots of, well, not a lot, but I mean, not nearly what is needed to meet the need of all of our Kyles. But we designed NTC with that in mind, and with those other programs, but with some bigger guidelines. And those bigger guidelines is we need to make our programming as accessible financially. It's got to be accessible. I mean, because the needs are so great, but these parents are spending 6 to 8 times the amount of money that it takes to raise a neurotypical child through age 18. And so by the time they get to us, they can't afford $50,000, $60,000, $70,000 a year, which is typical. Yeah. And those organizations that are that expensive, amazingly, have waiting lists. So you have parents who are mortgaging their houses, they're finding any financial means because they're desperate to find a place for their son or daughter. So it had to be financially accessible. And it had to be research-based, either with evidence or the research that we're doing just to come up with solid curriculum. We had to find teachers who are highly credentialed, either in special education or psychology, or transition specialist, vocational rehabilitation. And we had to bring our programming to our students. So one of the things that we found in our research is that most of these wonderful programs out there are putting forth some great programming, but they're finite. So they build buildings, or they move into buildings, or they create programming for just that single community. So students who want to access the programming have to either move to the community or don't. And that becomes, just unattainable. So what we wanted to do is design our programming so that it would be kind of turnkey for any community. And this is where we are, as far as I have done the research, we are completely unique in that we are designing our programming in a way that you can pack it up in a nice little suitcase and take it into any community that there's a need. So make it turnkey and make our programming comprehensive in scope. It focuses on social skills, living skills, and work-ready skills for those students who fall into that gap. And again, it's very specific. So if you look at the spectrum of individuals with disabilities, we are focusing solely on those students, those graduates who would qualify themselves as high functioning or fewer needs. And that's the vision. And that's what NTC is in a nutshell. And that's sort of beyond my 30-second speech. But Jessi, I always want to pull you into that. What am I missing in that, Jessi, in that description?
You did a fantastic job of giving us the overall picture of NTC. Yeah. Stuart, you did a great job of explaining the core skills that we're focusing on are the social interaction, the living skills, the work-ready skills, and the different themes that all of our courses fall into are personal wellness, community navigation, social relationships, civic responsibility, pre-vocational, vocational, and residential living, which Stuart mentioned, the apartment living experience that students can opt into.
And
Go ahead,
what
Stuart.
I was going to say is it's a 3-year comprehensive vision, right? So this is curriculum that's not 1 or 2 classes long. We're talking the entire curriculum is 30 classes within those 6 different curricular streams. not all of those themes have the same number of classes. You know, we focus more on the pre-vocational, vocational, and residential living and social relationships, because the design of the curriculum, we haven't designed it all, by the way. This is a vision. It takes time to do this. The vision is 3 years long under those curricular streams. And the idea of the typical student progression is that by the time they're done with those 3 years, they will have the skills necessary to live independently in the community of their choice.
That is awesome. And I really, I think it's so important to be able to dial in your ideal student, because when a program is able to do that, right? When a program is able to say, this is what we do and this is who we serve, and when those two things collide, magic happens, right? It always worries me when I talk to programs that say, oh, we'll help anyone. Right? That worries me, because the populations that we work with are so complex. They're wonderfully complex, that when you know exactly who you can serve and serve well, that is really when, I think that's like the secret sauce of any kind of program, right? I think, Stuart, you spoke a lot about accessibility, which is a big deal. Right. I mean, you're citing programs that are $50,000, $60,000, $70,000 a year. We all know of programs that can go up to $100,000, $150,000, $200,000 a year. And so that really does exclude people, I think, from being able to do this with a population that sometimes just needs some more time, some really thoughtful exposure, thoughtful opportunity, good teaching and guidance and practice, right? Because we are talking about like kind of where the rubber meets the road kind of skills about life. And that there's something so empowering, I think, about, it's not the academic piece, it's all the other stuff that makes life, and so that is so fantastic. Talk to me about the residential piece, because the residential piece is an optional thing. Right. But talk to me about like what that looks like and how that gets integrated into your program.
Okay, sure. I'll start here, Jessi, and then you come in wherever. So when we were designing this program, one of the pieces, the financial pieces that made programming so expensive, was that similar organizations doing similar work offer a residential piece from day one. And that's wonderful. But when you do that, it drives the expense up like by a factor of 10, right? Because you have to have that 24-hour supervision, support, and of course you immediately have rent. What we wanted to do was, remember, the overall vision here is that we want whatever we're designing has to be able to be implemented in any community, in any across the United States or the world, really. So if you think of our programming, whatever we're designing has to be able to be taken into a little suitcase and packed up and go to any place. So that means that we have to have the residential component wherever we go. So for us, what we wanted to do is, instead of offering residential at the beginning on day one, which would require that 24-hour supervision piece, we wanted to provide as much curriculum as we could possibly provide in a classroom setting up until the moment we could provide the practicum experience in an apartment. So for us, the 3-year cycle, the first 2 years is devoted solely to that classroom instruction. So it's that, it's the non-practicum piece. And then once our students have progressed through those first 2 years of courses, so about 20 classes, then the idea, of course, this is a vision. This has not been built out yet, right? So the vision is that at that point, and there will be a series of evaluations that will have to be done for each student who is ready for that next step. It's not that the students complete 20 courses and then they're automatically eligible for that next step. We have to make sure that they're ready. And at that point, after that evaluation piece has taken place, then they're eligible for the residential piece. So the residential piece is that third year. If a student progressed through full-time classes, through every quarter that we offer, the ideal would be that they would be ready for that piece after 2 years. But once they've completed that piece, then they're eligible for that residential piece. And that's that residential piece. The student lives in an apartment with a roommate, pays their own rent, has a job, and practices all of those skills that they've learned for those 2 years prior. What that does then is it eliminates the need for that 24-hour support, which is a high-cost item, and that we are able to provide support through 24-hour phone support and through these skills that they've learned and the resident and the roommates they're living with. And that's that practical experience. So if you're living on your own, you know that if you have a problem, first of all, let's think about all of the skills that we've attained and all of the classroom the settings that we've been involved in, and what can I use as my own skill set to resolve this conflict. Build out from that. Then you have friends, right? So your resiliency circle is the next piece, your friends. How can you involve them in your problem solving? And then the third piece is our 24-hour phone support or family. And that's how I live my life. I have to incorporate what I've learned and then extend it out beyond that with my friends and family to help me. And that third year is a 12 to 18 months. So there's a little bit of wiggle room for the student during that time, that practical experience. So that third year is 12 to 18 months. They're also taking more classes. And that's when we start getting into the curricular theme of being involved in our communities. So what does that look like? You can just go to work and you can, go home and live life, but how full is that life? And so part of the curricular piece during that 12 to 18 months is how do you get involved in your community? It's important to volunteer. It's important to vote, all of these civic responsibilities that become part of that. And then as they progress through through that year, we're encouraging them to find a community of their choice, right? So this is not a permanent place for them to live. And we do that on purpose. Remember that we're building this out so we can take this to any community that there's a need, which means if we built buildings and we had students there, then we've just created what's all across the United States in a finite solution. But if we create a way that we can have flow through apartments so these students can live there on a temporary basis, but yet still practice, then they move out and more students move back in. So we've created this flow through design. And in every community that I've seen of any particular size, they have apartments, they have students, they have teachers, they have business partners, they have all of the ingredients necessary for us to take this programming to any community of need. What am I missing, Jessi?
You did great. What I love is all the support that we provide throughout the entire process of independent living. Obviously, the preparation is huge once they're there, providing that ongoing support. But then as they come to the end of their 12 to 18 months, we are preparing them for what is the next step. You don't just graduate and you move out and you're done. It's where we're helping you find that location and helping you problem solve where your next destination will be. So I love the concept of support the entire way through. And when they leave us, they will be successful in their future living situation.
And that's a great point, Jessi. In fact, I'm glad you brought that up because the vision is also not to, so I equate this a lot of times to, we go through driver's ed, right? Most of us go through driver's ed and we sit in a classroom and we learn what to do in a car accident. And that's great. But then when we get into our first car accident, we freak out and we forget everything we've ever learned in driver's ed. Yeah. And so we need that support at that very moment. It's critical at that moment to have that support. And that's NTC, right? So when they graduate, they finish that 12 to 18 months, our vision is to, if you're a student NTC, you're a student NTC for life, right? So you can always come back to us and we can help you through that, those initial bumps. And what we anticipate is much like it is for you and I. We get into that first car accident and we freak out, we forget everything. But hopefully, and maybe car accident is the best analogy here, but hopefully we're in a lot of car accidents. But the next time we're in a situation like that, we remember, okay, now we've moved through this, right? Because when it comes to resiliency, we don't know if we're resilient until we need to be resilient. And so we can practice it all day long, but until we're in the situation, now we know how we're going to react. And we anticipate that after those first few bumps in the road, NTC will be that sort of thing where, I go back to my alma mater and it's cool. I buy a sweatshirt, but I don't need to go back there. But I'm glad they're still there. So.
Yeah. And this kind of idea of how experience is one of our best teachers, right? And that who we are today is really this generative effect or this cumulative effect of all the experiences that we've had and what we've done with our experiences. And I think you're right. That analogy of the car accident is so true. I remember my first car accident, and I was freaked out. So yeah, I think that's, really accurate.
And we have the ability to make such bad, so we can make it so much worse if we don't have that support there, right? If we say something or we do something to make it worse. And so we just want to make sure that we're there to help them through those initial bumps.
Yeah, and that life is not meant to live alone, and that we all need support and we all need help, and we reach out to our support systems and identify who's in the best position to help us with that thing, whatever that is, that's important too, right? Who's in our circles of support, and what do they look like? And when do I know I need help? And do I know how to ask for help? And, all of this great stuff. Jessi, if we could talk about the classes actually and what they look like, so do you guys start at a certain time, especially in the first couple years of the program? Are all the students meeting at the same time, taking the same classes together? Like, talk to us a little bit about that.
Yeah. We're just in our, I guess this is kind of our second year of classes. We started spring a year ago, and we had classes in the evening. Now we have some that are in the evening, some during the day. So that's where it does depend on the student's situation. If they have a job, whether it's a full-time job or a part-time job, they may opt to take certain classes that fit into their schedule. Now that we have this comprehensive 3-year plan, that's going to have things look a little bit different, I think, from here on out, starting this fall. But yeah, students, we have a class size limited to 15 students. That's the maximum that we have designated for our classes, because we want to make sure that they are small, that students feel comfortable, have that community feeling. But most importantly, we want to be able to give them the best feedback, support, and strategies that they can utilize to generalize the information to all areas of their life. So, yes, I'm not sure that I answered your question there.
And if I could, I'll tell you real quick, like it's important that we also explain where our classes are located. And the other piece to, again, remember, we want everything to be able to be packaged up and take wherever we can. So we are in the community. So our classes are community based. So if you remember, we don't have any buildings. I do my job anywhere. And our classes are in those locations that already have space that isn't being utilized. So one of our classes is in a bank. Another one is in a library. Where one of our partners is a community college. Another is a typical 4-year college. One of our classes is in the future will be at the YMCA. So if you go around the community, and this is actually kind of a fun challenge for me, anywhere I go, I can point to a building and I can say there is a space in that building that is not being utilized, and we ask to use that space at low or no cost, because we want to keep that cost as low as possible, because ultimately it comes down to keeping that tuition low. And wherever we're successful, we take that to any community, right? Say, we were at a bank. There's banks in almost every community that I know of. YMCAs of any community that's any size, libraries, they're everywhere, and most of them have great meeting space. So, and community colleges. I mean, around Nebraska, there are community colleges everywhere. So that's where our classes are located.
That's awesome. That's awesome. And then, so do you teach your students remotely as well? So like Stuart, if you were to teach a class and you're not, you're not necessarily physically there, how are they accessing, let's say, you as part of the lesson?
And I'll start with, I may teach one or two classes. One of the classes that I will be teaching is going to be the community navigation. As you mentioned before, I took an entire month and parked my car in a garage and learned how to learn how to ride the bus. And it was very enlightening, incredibly enlightening. And so I'll be teaching that course, and I'm doing it through experience and the knowledge that I received just by doing that. But my background, I'm not credentialed to, in my job, part of my job as the executive director is find really highly educated, credentialed instructors like Jessi to come in and do that job and then get out of the way. And I want to make sure I got the building for them, the classroom space, the money, and everything else is lined up. But then my job is to get out of the way. And then teaching remotely, and that provides a little bit more of a challenge for us, especially in today, when we start talking about having to kind of divide up our classes in person, but also remotely. And so I'll turn that kind of over to Jessi to kind of talk through what we've been doing there to work through that.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Yes. First and foremost, we definitely want to have our classes in person because we know what an impact that makes to be able to do that direct instruction, have that personal connection, that social interaction. And it's a little bit different when it's in a electronic format. But we have successfully had some of our sessions through the electronic format, and we are definitely changing with the times, and we'll be able to offer some of those opportunities for students who are remote, who maybe aren't in our communities. So we're always looking to find ways to bring those students to us as well. But first and foremost, if we can do them in person, that's our goal. So
Always, yeah. Always our goal.
Yeah. And that just makes so much sense, when we come back to experience and practice and how beneficial it is to even be around other people who are learning the same thing, and what experiences they bring and how great that is. Okay. Awesome. Let's jump to funding, Stuart. You've spoken a lot about making the program accessible. How do most of your students pay for this program?
And so the funding right now is really two of a three-peg stool. We're working to get to that third peg, but it takes a little while to get there. So the two pegs right now are donor-based, right? So we've been working to build NTC for the last 6 years, and a big portion of that is to make sure that we communicate our message effectively. We haven't always done so. We're getting much better at that, right? I was never an executive director. I was going to be in education. I was going to be a superintendent of public schools, and now I'm a web guru. I'm an accountant. I'm a Zoom professional. I do all of these marketing. I mean, I would have never, but now I'm doing all of those things. And a bigger one is the development in nurturing those donors and making sure that we're communicating the message in a way that they understand how effectively their dollars are being put to use. And one of those, most recently, as we're sort of trying to pivot to that, making sure that we can keep our students engaged and connected, to quickly pivot to an online resource, which we did through what we call NTC Connections. And that was, very quickly funded by a donor. So, and it was a 6-week course that Jessi designed, to implement completely online to keep our students connected while we kind of pivot to work, because we had to cancel our spring quarter classes because it was just too quick to pivot for our students. I think it was too quick for anyone, but especially our students. And so we quickly pivoted through our donors to be able to offer a course for free to our students to keep them engaged and connected. So our donors are our number one contributor to our funding at this point. Our second one is our tuition payments. And our tuition is $289 per class per quarter. And if our students take every one of our classes, and to include the 12 to 18 month practicum, living in an apartment, paying rent, our students are still under $13,000 for 3 years of instruction and 12 to 18 months of rent. So, you know, the accessibility, and now that being said, of course, eventually, right now that pays, just the tuition alone pays about 30% of our operating costs if we just use that alone. So we can't survive just on tuition. And we knew that going in, right? Because, you know, to make programming like this accessible, it costs a lot of money. It costs a lot of money to do, but we wanted to make sure we didn't pass that completely on to the students. So that's why our donors right now are so vitally important to making sure this program gets to that place where it's up and running. But eventually with our design, and that's what makes this so magical, is that when we are at capacity, so if we're at those 15 students per class, because we're not there yet, because it takes a long time to build up that student base, we can then eventually flip that. So instead of having 70% of our funding coming from donors, and eventually the third peg is grants. But we have, you know, we can't really get the grants right now because we need more evidence. We need more data that our program is being successful. But eventually we can flip that. So if we start moving into other communities and start offering our programming to more students, you know, there's a tipping point. You know, programming for our students is paid for at a certain enrollment per class. Well, you know, once we get that maximum enrollment, you can start seeing our programming our low tuition rate for our students will start paying for about 70% of our programming instead of 30. Just because we'll always be we'll always need have a donor base that will be required to continue to offer the programming at an affordable rate. But it'll be wonderful once we get to that place where the donor support is not at that 70% level. You know, we'll start getting to a more sustainable rate for donor support. And then you start adding in the grants, and that's where that third peg comes into play.
And how do most students find you guys?
You know, I'm the marketing and publicity director. Hi, how you doing?
Hi, nice to meet you.
Yes, I'll put that hat on now.
Yeah.
Oh, and web guru.
Yes.
So right now it's through opportunities like this, right? You know, opportunities like this to get the word out. It's web-based, it's Facebook, it's, you know, emails, building up our newsletter list to make sure that our donors and supporters stay involved and continue to receive, you know, updates as we go. But it's homegrown. I mean, this is grassroots. There is, and wonderfully enough, and you know, these small celebrations that are a big deal to me. Just not too long ago, we received our 20th student, and that's a big deal for us. We've got now 20 students who have been through our application process.
Yeah.
But now I've just received another application that was current student recommended. So we've got a current student who recommended our programming to a friend. And so you start receiving that, and so you start to see the momentum build a little bit and the word get out there that we're staying true to our vision, and that is we have high quality research-based and some evidence-based curriculum. We've got amazing instructors who are highly credentialed and dedicated folks. We've got a vision to make sure that we keep our programming at an affordable rate. And so when you stay true to those visions and that vision and ideal, it takes a tremendous amount of fortitude and perseverance, but and dedication from staff to volunteer their time until we get to a place where we can get that programming flying through the roofs. But so I don't want to ramble. I'll keep going on and on and on. Jessi, am I missing anything?
I think you covered very well.
Okay.
So Jessi, you are, you know, I love this because you guys are such a team, and Stuart often is saying like, look, I'm relying on the experts. right? To do the curriculum planning and execution. And this is why, you're here, because you are that curriculum expert, and you've been doing this for so long. What would you say is kind of the ideal student for the program, someone who really thrives in your program? Can you describe what they would look like?
Mm-hmm. Someone who really thrives in our program, first and foremost, has to be willing to accept a little bit of change and challenge. That's one of the first things that I talk to them about when we are starting our classes is we are going to be doing some things that are uncomfortable. Might be a little different from the way you've done it before, but that's how we grow. So being willing to accept, to kind of take some time and reflect, work on that self-awareness, and be willing to work through these struggles together. That's something I know, Gwen, you had mentioned, the support system. And we often talk about finding your advocate, who is someone that can help advocate for you and help you through situations. So who's your person? So, somebody who's willing to kind of step outside their box, because it's a big change to jump from, maybe their current situation, or if they just graduated from high school, to try to make that transition to adult living. There's a lot of change there. So being willing to work through those changes is a first component. Students, obviously, we have students a variety of age ranges. So, generally speaking, I would say kind of our current population is kind of in that 18 to 25 year range, but there is no upper limit. We have students that are older than that and are more than welcome to come and join us. Many of these students really do have that desire and the intention to be able to move out on their own and live independently and interdependently. So, this is a program that's for those students that have those goals and desires and want to really work hard and get to their definition of success. So.
And there are more specific, eligibility requirements, on the website that the students can go check out. We start getting into the nuts and bolts of it too. They have to have a verified disability, and there are other eligibility considerations that we have out there for students to kind of take a peek at. We also have a narrative of what a student scenario might look like. Her name is Janet, and we made up the name, but it's out on our website, and we tell a story of a student. So Janet just graduated from high school, and it kind of gives a little narrative of what Janet has done and what she's looking forward to and what she's trying to find. And that, it's one thing to have a list of eligibility requirements, and it's another to kind of tell a story and a narrative, so kind of students can kind of see if this is a program for them. And the other piece of that is, when I was doing my research for my dissertation, I was all into quantitative research, and that's all numbers, and numbers are wonderful. And I was 31 years in the military, so I love structure, right? And numbers, you can't lie with numbers. 1 + 1 is 2, and you can't get around that. And so my research was going to be quantitative. And then it turned quickly into qualitative. And for those not familiar with qualitative, it's all about finding themes and getting used to the gray area and having conversations and not really being sure. And all of that turned my skin inside out as I started thinking about this. But man, did I love working in the gray area. And that's what helps NTC kind of thrive. And it even comes into consideration with our eligibility requirements, right? So yes, this is what we design and this is what we're about, but a lot of what you'll read through is the ability for us to have those conversations, because eligibility requirements, state these things, but there's always questions. And for us, it's all about having a deeper conversation with students who think or may not think this might not be for them, but it might through a conversation. So, we always just encourage students, if they have any questions, prospective students or parents or support systems, to reach out if they have any questions as to whether or not this would be appropriate for them.
Yeah, and that's awesome. This gray area, and for many of us that have been in intervention, we're all about behavioral outcomes and things like this and measurement, right? And then we get to where the rubber is meeting the road, and wow, there is a lot of gray. And what it sounds like is, and what I've seen, I think, is people who can meet the gray areas are the people who are attentive and thoughtful and committed to how dynamic this is, and you're able to pivot where you need to pivot, right? And I think that's very evident, not only in good job, webmaster, by the way, in your website.
Well, now let me condition that a little bit. I get up there and I maintain it, but we've got her name is Ann Woodford. I need to make sure that I say that name. She's amazing. And I can dial her up at any moment and say, Ann, I just screwed up the website again. Can you help me? And then she would immediately go out there and do that. So
nice.
I'm
when you break it,
Stuart, in my own mind, right?
Right. So you when you break it, she can fix it. In other words,
yes.
Yes. But your enthusiasm, is what is really evident. So I think that's so great. Maybe I'll just fast forward you. I'm going to throw this one at Jessi. I'm going to fast forward you a little bit, Jessi, and it's a little bit early only because, you guys are just kind of like this really beautiful bootstrapping emergent program who's, really meeting needs. What do you imagine to be the picture of a graduate? Right. What would a graduate of NTC look like? And, I know that it's a 3-year program, and I think all of us, we just talked about gray area, right? So we kind of know it might be a little longer, a little shorter than 3 years. It's really dependent upon the student. But what would you imagine to be the picture of a graduate of NTC?
Yes. Well, and you're exactly right. Every student is different. So I would say my picture of a graduate at NTC is that they have achieved the goals they have set forth at the beginning when they started NTC. So if their goal was to go through our 3-year program and complete the residential living component and be able to live in an apartment by themselves or with a roommate, and that's what they're doing, that is a successful graduate. If a student decides that they want to take some courses and they want to work a part-time job, live at home, whatever it is that they have set their goal for, then they are a successful graduate as well. So I think it depends upon the students. Obviously, if they're going for our 3-year program, we'd love to see them living interdependently out in the community.
That's a great point, Jessi. It is so highly individualized. It's every student who comes to us, the first thing we talk about is, what are your goals? I mean, what is it that you want to accomplish? And what we can do is we've got the programming, we think, and the vision to help them accomplish whatever those goals are to completion, right? Up to and including living on your own in an apartment, working a job, and doing whatever it is that you want to do, finding your niche, just like all of us do in the community, being, paid a wage that is acceptable for your ability to live independently, whatever that looks like. And there's that gray area. And our students, we talk a lot about the 3-year program, and the program is designed in a way that if students wanted to take a full-time course load, for us, that's 3 courses a quarter, straight through. And to include our summer flex quarter, which, is a different story, but if you include all of that and they took every course that we offered, they could progress through that in 3 years. That's a full-time student. And we anticipate that, a lot of our students are going to be the part-time students, and they may not want to take any pre-vocational, vocational school or courses that we offer. They've got a job, they're cool there. I don't need any of that. But what I really want to focus on is give me some more of that community navigation stuff, or the social relationships, or residential living. That's stuff I really need to focus on. And that's where Jessi, made so clear is that, that's going to be up to the student. So we offer our courses, and it's on a set schedule. Every quarter, we offer these classes, and they'll come around again at the beginning of the next year. Mm-hmm. And it's just the way any typical college really does in their catalog. And so if the course if we don't have the course that they want right now, they just know that in a year it's going to circulate around again. So so that's kind of the design, is full and part-time.
Yeah. This word, which I think we all understand, but maybe it would be helpful for others to understand, is this idea of interdependent, right? I think a lot of times we talk a lot about independence, when the reality is there is quite a phase of interdependence. And, we all are interdependent on others even. So maybe, I don't know, Jessi, if you want to pick up this thread, but to you, if you would define interdependence for us, what would that be?
I would say that's a great question. That my definition, if I were to be talking to a student right now, it would be just that give and take relationship where you are working with another individual for whatever best needs for each other. So, I give examples in my classes where students, maybe you're faced with a really important decision. So whether it's buying a new car or trying to find a new apartment, or if you're deciding to take some college classes at the local university, maybe those are some decisions you want to talk through with someone. That is an interdependent decision that you may want to just kind of discuss, throw around, get some pros and cons, and that interdependence is that other person maybe assisting you to make sure that your best interests are being met. And that's an advocate. That's someone who 100% has your best interests at heart.
And then I start getting into the nuts and bolts kind of, the administrative role of what interdependence means to me. And that comes down to, and I use this example, I don't know if it's the best example, but, if I want a pork chop, I don't have a farm. I rely on farmers or maybe a better example is a loaf of bread. I can make it, but I can also buy it. And so it's those organizations in town that we rely on. I mean, we have mm-hmm. to, I am not completely independent. You mm-hmm. see those reality shows that, I think one is called Alone, where they just drop you off with a knife and, 4 matches and say, go live in the wilderness and we'll come get you whenever you need to be shipped out of here. And you may survive for a day, you may survive for 2 months, you may survive a lifetime, but most of us are not well equipped for that. And so we are interdependent. We are dependent upon other organizations in the community to help us not just survive, but thrive. And so the interdependence piece is not just grocery stores, it's those organizations that offer us the ability to thrive. And we were talking before about civic engagement. What does that mean? And how does that contribute to our interdependence? In fact, when we were coming up with our mission statement is, and right now it's to empower individuals with autism and other disabilities to learn, work, and live within our communities. Initially, it was much longer than that. It included the word independence, but it started with interdependence. And then we went back and forth. Well, I mean, are we really truly independent? Well, we're really not, but nobody understands what interdependence is. So then we just got rid of both of them.
Yeah.
Because it was just easier. But, it's a great topic to discuss in that none of us is truly independent. And, Jessi spoke to the relational, and then you have just the nuts and bolts pieces of survivability with regard to, those organizations that help us thrive emotionally and physically.
Yeah. And, there's something really strong that I get from both of you, which is a sense of respecting the agency of your students, right? That they're agents of their own life and that you believe that they're competent, right? And engaged in their own life. And when you meet someone there, I think that's how you dance this dance, because what I find a lot of times is I have clients who are desperate to be more independent, just desperate, but not ready yet in some areas. And so how do you provide support or consult or financial support, whatever that might be? How do you do that while not disempowering somebody? Right? How do you do that and continue to empower them and give them the support, hopefully helping them build their own skills to get to where they want to go? But it's very clear to me that you guys come back to the sense of someone's agency. The picture of the graduate is, did they meet the goals that they set for themselves? Not that goals change, right. But that they're fully engaged in the process of setting their own goals and being agents in their own life, and that I think is such an empowering and great place to be, because I think when some of my clients come from systems where they're like, oh, well, you can't do this and you can't do that, so let me give you support here and let me do this for you, and and it comes from good places and the intent is always very good, right. But they get now to this part of their life and they go, uh-oh, what? I don't know how I'm going to get from here to there.
Right.
Like,
yeah.
Right?
You hear a lot of times, and a lot of our students come to us and they say, they hear no, you can't, and there isn't, right?
Yeah.
And all they hear is no, you can't, there isn't. And so I say that part of our vision is to turn that around and say, yes, you can, and there is, right? And so turn it around. And how do we do that? And you mentioned, and for us, one of the first things I do when I'm talking to a prospective student or parent or guardian, I'll say, well, what's your niche? What's your thing? What is it that you love to do if you have free time? Mm-hmm. And everyone always has an answer. There's something. And then what we want to do is build upon that conversation. So let's start there. And I guarantee you, and I know I'm an idealist and I live in this ideal world where everything is rainbows, teddy bears, and butterflies. But I believe that niche has its place in the community somewhere. It's got to, and there's no doubt in my mind that there's a place for it. One of our students, his name is Jake. And if you go out to our website, you can see Jake's comics.
His comics.
Yeah, well, this started with that exact same conversation. Jake, what's your niche? Well, I love to draw comics. Oh my goodness, Jake, let's see a few of these. And I told Jake, I said, Jake, could you imagine submitting your comic to a newspaper somewhere? Well, what do you mean? Well, I said, people get paid for that. People get paid for that? I said, yeah, people make a lot of money doing that. And they're doing something they love. And it dawned on him at that very moment, I don't have to do something I don't want to do. I mean, we all have to at some point in our life, if you want to be an air traffic controller, you don't start off in the control tower. A lot of times you start off by carrying luggage. It's not necessarily that I want to do that, but I know it's a step in that direction. And that's a conversation we have with every one of our students. How do we find where that niche fits, build upon it, and then find out how we can make that an employable skill. So, but back to Jessi, when it comes to supporting students, maybe, I know that that's your niche too, so I don't want to take up all the time.
No, you're good. You're good. Yeah. As far as the support goes, obviously we're providing them with direct instruction, but the true learning occurs after that. It's that guided practice. It's the going through the real life scenarios. What I absolutely love in all of the classes is students always provide those natural scenarios. They'll say, well, wait a minute, what about this? Yeah. And then it's a perfect natural teaching opportunity that we can discuss. Okay, well, let's see, this happened when you were at work. Okay, what could you have done differently? How could we do that do it a little bit differently next time. And it's great because the students collaborate with each other.
Yeah.
And that is my favorite part of it, is the classroom discussions, the collaboration. And like I said, they do such an incredible job. It is natural that the real life scenarios pop up. I have some planned already in my pocket, but they tend to come up with them. And so we focus on what's happening in your world, what has happened to you, or what could happen that we want to plan ahead for. So,
yeah. So meeting them where they are and being attentive. Like, I think that's exactly why you can pivot when you do, is because you have attentive, engaged people in that place of support and teaching versus, no, I've got an agenda. This is the class. So, save your questions to the end, because we got to get through, my PowerPoint presentation or whatever that is. And, because you guys have such a strong mission and vision, what you're about, what you're trying to do here. And so it allows for you some latitude to meet them where they are, because ultimately it's just content. You know what your process is already. You know what kind of process you're engaging. The content is like, give it to me, what give me the stuff that's pertinent or salient to you at this time. I know we could probably do a whole interview just on interdependence, because I find it to be a fascinating topic. And I find it to be something I think about a lot when I'm supporting students and their families and adults and their support systems, and how we really stay, solely empowering of others, whether that's the student or even their family, because I think sometimes that's even the challenge, right? Which is, how do we help families also transition to this idea of letting go of their adult children, and how hard that is. And when they can trust, what I see is when they can trust the system or the program, that's when they can start to let go of needing to be involved, because parents want for their adult children to be happy and successful. We're all aligned really in all the same goals, really. And it's so to be able to understand and have a felt sense of a program is so important, so that can also, there can be space there as well, for a student to explore. Okay. I always end my interviews this way. So, because I always find it to be so fascinating how people answer this question. But Jessi, we'll start.
What's my spirit animal?
Yes. What is your spirit animal, Stuart? Out of curiosity, what is it?
Oh, man, never mind. I didn't mean it.
I take it back. I don't want to tell.
I would have to say it'd have to be a golden retriever. But I mean, that's an easy one for me, because I've always owned golden retrievers. So, kind of laid back, easygoing, still a personality, a little feisty, a little mischievous, can bark when I need to, but for the most time, you won't even know I'm there. I'm going to be at your side, become thick or thin, until the day I die. That's me. That's where I am. That's where I'm going to be. But just look at me and pet me and call me a good boy.
And optimistic. Golden retrievers are so optimistic. I always feel like they have a great sense of optimism, which is very clear for you. I love it. We're going to have to, Jessi, after this interview, we'll have to, Photoshop Stuart in some kind of golden retriever. We'll have to, we should get one of your students to do that, because I'm sure one of your students would be able to draw Stuart as a golden retriever.
Oh, yes.
Oh, yeah.
I'm a good looking dog.
That's it. Okay. So Jessi, if you could only choose one skill to foster or empower in your students, what would it be and why?
Oh, and that is a hard one. Stuart and I were actually talking about this, because I have a difficult time deciding on just one, because I feel like they interact so well together, so many things. Goodness, if I had to choose, I think I would say that one of my top skills that I think are so important for all of our students is communication. I think that's a huge one that goes into all areas because it filters into the social relationships, into work, into school, into advocating. It's hard for me to separate that from all the other incredible skills out there, but I know communication is such a huge piece for being able to navigate and be successful in the community.
Yeah.
And
Stuart.
can I add to that? So, and adding to Jessi is, you know, people earn double PhDs in communication and still are terrible at it, right? And so part of that piece is, you know, the piece of communication that makes us so human. And that is the resiliency. Well, I mean, the resiliency is built into that, but the compassion, the empathy, the sympathy, to build. And ultimately, I think, and Jessi and I were talking about this before, as far as resiliency goes, resiliency is another umbrella, you know, ability, but without the communication piece, which is an umbrella for the compassion and the empathy and those components that make us humans, and to be able to initiate and nurture friendships. And that's that communication piece, right? And to have that compassion and those feelings of empathy that strengthen those bonds for our students who so desperately want. I would say without hesitation that when our students come to us, the first thing they say is they want friends.
Yep.
You know, I need a friendship circle. Desperate for friendship, but unable to be able to initiate friendships is a tragedy. Yeah. I mean, it's an absolute tragedy for our existence as a human being to not have the skill set. And it's not that they don't have the skill set, right? It's about uncovering the skill set that will help them navigate that. To me, I can walk away I can die a happy man if we can help our students navigate that. If that was our only job, is to navigate that pathway.
Yeah. Yeah. And how important those things are, because it is what gives your life a sense of joy, right? And fulfillment are the people that we're with and that we get to spend time with. So, how do people get in touch with your lovely program? How, if they're after, you know, I need to talk to someone over at NTC, what would they do?
Well, there's three different ways. First of all, you can reach out via email. It's really easy, info@nebraskatransitioncollege.org. You can certainly reach out to me directly, but that email comes straight to me, and and it's easy to remember, info@nebraskatransitioncollege.org. The other one is go to our website, nebraskatransitioncollege.org, all one word. And there's tons and tons of information out there, including frequently asked questions. And so if you are curious about whether this programming is for you, there's a section just for you entitled that, is this programming for me? And then they can call us directly at our Google Voice, 402-413-5627. And they can reach out directly to us, and we're happy to answer any questions.
And I'll put all of that information in the description, so I'll make sure to do that as well. Before we end, do you see any potential? And I love this idea of this turnkey, kind of put it in your pocket suitcase program, which I love. Do you see any options for people who may not live in Nebraska?
And I wonder, in fact, as soon as I stopped talking about how to get a hold of us, I wanted to include that.
Include that.
In that, so the vision, of course, is to be able to take our programming wherever a need exists. And for us, what that means is, if people are listening to this and they live in Nevada or California or Sweden, I want to encourage them to avoid saying to themselves, well, I mean, this is Nebraska, I can't do anything. And instead turn to this. If there is a need in my community, we can get their programming here. And so all you have to do is give us a call, reach out to us so we can start that conversation. And and for us to show a need in the community, a prospective student just needs to apply. And our application is on our website. It's free of charge. It takes a little time to complete. But once we see a geographic area of need, so, within a 30, 40-mile radius, if we start receiving 5, 6 applications from that student, from that area, all we do then is we reach out, we start doing research in that community and say, hey, do we have any teachers there? Do we have any businesses who would be willing to support a classroom? Do we have, someone who can help coordinate activities there? And all of a sudden, we have a Nebraska Transition College in, Sweden. I will go there. I will go to Sweden myself and get
you're
that
dedicated.
programming up and going. Oslo, Norway, I can go there too. Anywhere, it's beautiful. I am happy to go set up programming. But in all seriousness, it's really that easy just to start the conversation. And we're already ready for the next step because this is a vision, this is where we start getting optimistic, right? We've already purchased the website, nationaltransitioncollege.org.
Love it.
That way we don't have to change our initials.
Yeah, that's so smart. And it's really future. It's really being very insightful about what's needed, which is, a nuts and bolts practical program that prepares adults for living their life in a way that they want to, right? It's really filling in that gap. There is a huge need for this. And so I am so grateful to both of you for being willing to spend your time with me and talking about this program, and for you being open to having people contact you. And I really hope that happens, because I think that I can tell you right now, here in California, there isn't a program really quite like this. And I love to see that. So you better watch what you wish for, Stuart, because we'll see what happens. Anyway,
hey,
so
we're
thank
all set.
you.
We're ready to go. Thank you so
Awesome.
much, Gwen. It's awesome to be
Thank
part of
you.
this. And it's so
Thank
nice
you.
to have you part of NTC as well.
Thank you. Yes, at any time, please reach out. I'm happy. I love just collaborating and, talking about it. I love it. So reach out to me anytime. Thank you guys so much.
Thank you so much for spending your time and attention here. I hope this interview with Stuart and Jessi helped bring some insight or transformed your thinking in a meaningful way. Contact information for the Nebraska Transition College is in the description below, where you'll also find a link for the transcript of this entire interview. If you got any value from this interview, please hit that like button and subscribe to this channel, where my goal is to empower you with reliable information that can transform thinking to practical action. See you in the next video, and thanks for watching.